everybody, this is Mandy with Mandy's Adventures, and I am standing in front of Fort Assinniboine in Havre, Montana, off of Highway 87. I get to go on a tour today, and Steffani is taking me on that tour. I am so excited to look around, see what Fort Assinniboine has to offer, and I am taking you with me. Let's go.
Alright, so the fort starts in 1879, and kind of how this all begins is General William Tecumseh Sherman comes up to Fort Benton. He hears all these really horrible stories about rogue Indians running around killing the settlers. It wasn't true, but he does take that information back to President Grant at the time and says, we need some sort of military outpost up further north in this direction. So 1879, like I said, the fort is established. It takes about 4 years to build over the 100 buildings that are going to be here on the fort grounds, and it's going to cost about $2 million. Pretty impressive. It is going to be the largest military fort in Montana, and it's going to be the second largest military fort in the United States at the time, only second to Fort Leavenworth in Kansas. So pretty awesome. And what you see here on the map is not the entirety of the military reserve. The military reserve was actually 500,000 acres. So we have the entirety of the Bear Paws over in this direction that were all a part of the military reserve, as well as the Rocky Boys Reservation was cut out of the military reserve as well. So it's going to be a pretty stately complex, which is pretty awesome. I also like to talk about the name Assinniboine. You'll notice that our name, the spelling up here is different than the one on that little thing over there. There are also many different ways to spell Assinniboine if you're looking at the tribe. So it's just kind of one of those interesting things. So this is the official fort spelling of Assinniboine. If you were looking at the tribe, it would be one less N on the inside there in the middle. And you know, I've also seen it spelled with no E at the end, so there's lots of different ways that you can spell Assinniboine. What Assinniboine means is stone boilers. They were actually given that name by a different tribe, and the reason why they called them that is that they use heated stones to boil their meat in stacks, so that's where they get that name. However, that name, or the tribe, actually calls themselves Nakota, which is different than the name that was given to them. So it was kind of a, you know, an interesting thing that they would name the fort after a local Montana tribe, even though they didn't really hunt in this territory. This is actually Blackfeet and Gros Ventre territory that we would have been sitting on here. So this building right here that we were just inside of is the Post Library. It was not the first library, it was actually the second library building here on the fort grounds. This building, like all of the buildings that you will see today, have been modified. This would have been more open, less offices, but they actually used this as an office building for the Northern Ag Research Center, which takes over in 1915. So they've also been here for a very long time. This building right here would have held about 1,000 volumes of books, mostly just donated by the men themselves. You know, maybe they had read that book and then they were going to go station somewhere else, so they would just leave it here for the other men to read. They also had 33 different newspapers that they could read here as well. You can imagine how outdated they would have been by the time that they got all the way up here. And 15 different magazines. So trying to curb the boredom that's going to be very, very apparent because, like I said earlier, they didn't really do a whole lot. They were basically caught between military action. You know, Custer's last stand had already happened. The Battle of the Bear Paws, which is south of Chinook, had already happened. So really, they didn't have a whole heck of a lot to do out here. So boredom would have been a pretty big deal. But we did have a lot of different African American groups that were out here. They were dubbed the Buffalo Soldiers by the Cheyenne. A lot of people talk about how, you know, well, how did that come to be? Maybe it was the hair, the skin color, but the point being that we like to always talk about here is the Buffalo Soldiers were seen as really good soldiers, and they kind of get their reputation after the Civil War, even though I kind of find that funny because black soldiers have been in every single war that we've been involved with, so it's just kind of funny they get a good reputation after the Civil War. So we had multiple different groups of all African American soldiers up here. We had the 10th Cavalry, which is a picture of them right here. We also had the 9th Cavalry, as well as the 24th and 25th Infantry. Obviously, all of these groups are going to be headed by a white officer. That would have been proper for the time period, if you will. They didn't really do a whole lot when they were up here. Mostly what they did was rounding up the Cree Indians that were coming down from Canada and basically trying to deport them back up to Canada. But you can imagine how well that worked out. You know, quite literally the next day they were coming back over the border. You know, let's try to tell the nomadic people that they need to stay in their country, right? That didn't really work very well. We also have some famous Buffalo soldiers that were out here. One of them, his name was Horace Bevins. He was in the military for 33 years, and out of those 33 years, he got 32 different medals. One of them being the Silver Star, which is the second highest medal that you can receive. He also has 5 gold stars in a marksmanship competition, and I guess that his score has never been beaten. So not only is he highly decorated, he also is a really good shot, which is pretty cool. We also have some other famous people that were out here. Have you ever heard of John J. Pershing, Blackjack Pershing? No. So John J. Pershing is most famous for his servitude in World War I. This is a picture of him in his World War I uniform. He was in charge of all the American forces in Europe during World War I, so that's why he gets to be as famous as he does, or is. He's actually a 6-star general, which they don't give out that ranking. There's only 2 people in American history that have that ranking, and it's him and George Washington, so pretty famous guy. But he was out here from 1895 to 96. He was actually a lieutenant, and he was in charge of the 10th Cavalry, and that's where he gets his nickname Blackjack from. During the Spanish-American War, he actually asked to be reassigned with the 10th Cavalry, and he takes them down to the Caribbean to fight. So he really enjoyed being with them and really wanted to continue to be ahead of them. So that's pretty awesome. I always think it's kind of cool that somebody so incredibly famous came out to Montana, you know? Who would have thought, right? Out in the middle of nowhere at that time. So just to give you a little bit of a perspective on what the dynamic of the fort would look like with the people. Before the Spanish-American War breaks out, we have about 590 people living here on the fort, so military personnel. And after the Spanish-American War breaks out, we have 19 military personnel left. The reasoning behind that is because they used to think that African Americans had immunities to tropical diseases like malaria. So they sent a massive amount of black soldiers down to the Caribbean and to the Philippines to fight. But we all know that that's not true, but that's what they thought back then. So you can imagine out of those 590 soldiers, how many of them were the Buffalo Soldiers. So they were sent massively out of this area. Could you imagine just 19 people being in charge of this fort? And with all these buildings, it's kind of crazy, right? I also like to talk about the John A. Burns sign. So he was actually born here on the fort grounds. You'll notice that the Assinniboine there is spelled incorrectly. He was born here. His father was a sergeant. They then moved to Hawaii. where, you know, kind of tragically his father like abandoned his family in Hawaii and left, you know. But he eventually helps Hawaii become a state. He becomes the governor. He also helps Alaska become a state, and he did a lot of work with the Japanese Americans during World War II, because there is a very high population of them living in Hawaii. So he kind of tried to help them keep their rights at that time. So he gets a fancy little sign here. But I like to remind people that this was its own little community. Lots and lots and lots of people were born here in the fort grounds. They had a very large hospital. They had, you know, basically everything that they needed, because it was its own little society. Nothing else was out here. Havre wasn't created yet. That was after the fact. So that was it.
So these are the original bars from the jailhouse?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. They only would have been about 6 feet long and a couple feet wide. The only thing that they got with them was their bedroll. So if you can imagine sleeping on this floor with no cot, just your bedroll, would have been pretty fun, right? They also had to be let out to go to the bathroom. Their bathroom was in that back corner over there. So there was nothing in these cells except for themselves and their bedrolls. That's
oh,
yeah.
So don't get in trouble.
You can see that they did have heat. The boiler room was in the basement on the opposite end of this building over here. Another thing that I like to talk about that's super cool, because I had no idea until someone told me, but they actually did these on purpose, these little slots here. They would leave these bricks loose, and during the summertime they would pull them out so they get a little extra airflow. So it's kind of like air conditioning, but you know, like early 1900s. On the outside of the building, you'll notice that there's grates and stuff on there, so people can't be, you know, shoving stuff through. You know.
Oh,
so they definitely
yes.
made sure that they couldn't be, you know, putting contraband in here.
No kidding. And let's take a look inside.
This is the guard room, so you can imagine desks and chairs and things like that, people being processed in and out. The bathroom for the guards. It's got a tin floor, which is kind of interesting. But this is what I really like to show people about the graffiti. The last guard done at Fort Assinniboine actually signed their names and put March 19th, 1911, which was when they ended.
Wow. Oh boy. These are the names.
Yeah.
Maybe someone might recognize their ancestors.
Okay, so this building right here that you see was actually a part of what we call the Post Exchange building. Post Exchange building was kind of like the shopping mall of the fort, if you will. In this building they had a little store for all the things that they couldn't make themselves. There was also the post office in this building. The top part right here had a couple rooms where people could come and stay if they had wanted to, if they were coming through, stopping by. Also on this part of the building, we have the officers club. So this is where the officers could come and hang out and basically do all the things the enlisted men couldn't do, like drink and, you know, stuff like that. So just kind of a little thing with the differences between enlisted men and officers. They had their club here. The enlisted men's club, if you will, was at the very opposite end of the parade ground, way out there. So very, very opposite side of the parade ground, because remember, never shall the two meet. So that's the amusement hall, or what you can call a hop room. That's where they had fancy parties.
Nice.
Yeah, and you can actually see the remnants of the sidewalk over here. That was the original sidewalk.
Wow. And it's too bad it's not used today. Okay. And this is the amusement hall that we just saw outside. Beautiful. And look at these floors. Wow. I bet this was a hopping place at once upon a time. This is neat. This seriously does remind me of the Tower of London in London.
This building right here is where the single officers would have stayed. There are 6 apartments in this building. It was meant to house 2 officers and their live-in servant girls. So even if you weren't married, you didn't have a wife to take care of you, well, guess what? You got somebody who can do that for you. So the turret is not for anything special other than it's pretty. It's an architectural thing that they did at the time. That first enlisted men's barrack across the way also would have had a turret on it. So they're almost like the bookends of the parade ground, if you will. It does make the first apartment just a little bit bigger because they get access to the 2 rooms in the turret. So nobody was, you know, sitting up there patrolling with their rifles or anything like that. It's just a pretty thing that they did.
So this cottonwood tree is old. Steffani was just saying the people that were originally here planted this tree. That is amazing.
Yeah. Some of this is original, some is not, as you'll kind of notice as we go through here.
I love these doors. Oh my gosh.
Pretty fancy.
Wow, look at that.
That is the original staircase.
Nice.
This was converted when the ag station took over into 2 separate apartments. So you'll notice there's a kitchen and a bathroom on both levels, but that wasn't the case. The kitchen would have been down here, and then the bathroom would have been upstairs.
Wow.
When these guys, when the officers were living here. So yeah, you're welcome to wander around.
Look at this. Okay, I've got to say, I know we're in Havre, Montana, but this seriously is like walking into an English house. Like with the radiator and the fireplace. Wow.
We don't know what happened to the mantle.
Yeah, look at this. I would seriously live here, Steffani, wouldn't you?
Mm-hmm.
I would.
It's bigger than my apartment. I'll tell you that much. It continues if you keep walking.
Wow, look at this.
Further and further.
Steffani, should we have a cup of tea?
Right. Yeah, I think they found that in one of the apartments.
Wow.
A lot of people just packed up and left. So there was a lot of things left from like the 60s and 70s.
Wow. What a gem. Oh my gosh. And it has such a nice feeling in here. Mm-hmm. You know when you walk into a house and you either get the nice feeling or the EGBGs.
Mm-hmm.
This is a nice feeling in here. Wow.
It's a very spacious area.
Yep.
You can go back to this.
Okay.
This is not the original kitchen. This is the modified kitchen that would have been here. It's kind of small.
Yeah.
So back in this back room, this used to be the kitchen. So from here back,
wow.
Bathroom, like I said, you can actually see where the stove was back here. And some of the apartments actually still have the kitchen.
Wow, super cool. I just can't get over these radiators. You know, I mean, they are old. And there are some houses that still have radiators, so.
Yeah, they were used to heat up the water too. So they had hot running water.
Okay.
Yep. And then a sewer system is going to be put in later. So they really did have it really nice out there.
Yeah, no kidding. These are lovely. And we get to go upstairs. Oh, wow. And these were the original stairs?
Yep.
Wow.
They're pretty perfect still, actually.
No, and the banister is, wow. Oh my gosh. Wow. Sorry, I keep saying wow, but it's like
no,
lovely. They don't make houses like this anymore. So here, should we just go in here and wow. And this would have been a bedroom. And what year were these built, Steffani? Do you know?
This building was built in the 1880s.
Wow.
One of the first buildings built right when they, started constructing. Yeah, they obviously did officers' row first.
Yes.
The officers are more important than the enlisted men, so
Yes.
that's why this side was done first.
Wow, look at this. Yeah, don't make them like this anymore, that's for sure. Wow, pretty neat.
So this room probably was for one of the live-in servant girls.
Boy, this would have been small. Oh look, and they had their own kitchen and self-contained. Wow.
then another room for servant girl. And bathroom.
Wow.
The original bathroom.
Wow. Is that the original bathtub?
I'm not sure. Probably.
Oh, that's amazing. What a beautiful place. And this is the outside of this apartment building. Pretty impressive. Wow.
This building right here was meant for those married officers. There were duplexes. This is the first of a line of 13 homes that look exactly like this one, except for there were 3 single-family homes in the middle of that line of 13. So you can think of 5 duplexes, 3 single-family homes, 5 duplexes, and then another one of the single officers' quarters at the very, very end. You can imagine little kids running around, women with their chicken coops and maybe their little gardens. That definitely would have been a part of this building story. As you can see, they painted it white, but it does still have that, you know, brick underneath there. So it is, you know, a typical brick building that you'd see here on the fort. It's really cool.
Now these buildings I am so fascinated with because I see them every time I drive on 87, which is the highway right over here. And what are those buildings called, Steffani?
They're cavalry barracks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the 3 in front, and then the one in the back is the stable for the cavalry. There used to be 6 out there, just for the cavalry.
Wow. Okay.
So this is the chapel. This is also where the children would go to school. The enlisted men could also come to learn how to read or write, so teaching people how to be literate for the time would have been a nice bonus for them. You can imagine how important this building would have been to the people here. They would have gone to church every Sunday, the kids would have gone to school. Also, the chaplain would have been military. Him and his wife would have been the ones taking care of this building. We also have something kind of cool that happened here at the fort. We had the very first African American ever to be in charge of a military outpost out here. He just happened to be the highest ranking officer, and he was a chaplain. It was during the Spanish-American War when I talked about there were only 19 people here, so he was just in charge. His name was William T. Anderson, and granted he was only in charge for about 3 months before he was then replaced by a white officer, but still kind of cool that we can say first time ever in American history.
Nice.
So, pretty awesome.
Absolutely.
So this is the hospital building. It was 2 stories. It had 12 rooms in it. Inside, we have other pictures of it, and you can see crosses, white crosses on the top, so anybody from the surrounding area could actually see that there was a place to get medical attention, which was, you know, good for everybody out here.
Definitely worth it. So much history, and we're so lucky to have these buildings standing today and really preserved for us. I have ended my adventure at the Fort Assinniboine. Wow, there is so much history here. So much history, so much to see, so much to do. I could seriously spend all day here. But I really want to thank Steffani. Steffani, thank you for taking me on this fabulous tour. You are so knowledgeable, and you really had this place come to life in my eyes that I was just so lucky to team up with you today. Thank you so much. If you would like more information about the Fort Assinniboine, coming onto the tour, or about the Living History Days, look in my description box and the information will be there for you. Until we meet again, take care, love one another, and I will see you soon. Bye.